Great, we are live. Welcome. Welcome to this week's episode of Lilith's live show, where I will talk to you about shadow work. Hi to everybody on the recording. Please let me know how you're doing today and what you're most excited to learn in this session. While I wait for those who are going to join me here live. I see some of you are already coming online. Please say hi to me. Let me know where you're joining me from. Let me know what you already know about shadow work, what you're most excited to learn. It is getting chilly here in Austria. Autumn has come. Hi, Elena. Welcome. How are you today? Who else is here? Please say hi to me. Today is going to be a really interesting session. Well, I like to, I feel that all of these sessions are interesting. And this one is just very spot on for this year, for this intense year of 2020, where our shadows come up a lot, our individual shadows, our collective shadow. So this is a really important topic for us to dive into. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Tana. Hi, Christy. How are you all today? What are you most excited to learn about in this session? Hi, Lori. Christy is joining us from the East Coast in the US. Lori from Vancouver Island. Welcome. Good. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to start with what the shadow is, right? That's the most important question because there's lots of misunderstandings around that. And then we're going to talk about how it is created. That's also important to understand. And then we're going to talk about ways to notice, confront, and integrate our shadow. And we do that with the help of shadow work. And I'm going to dive into two different aspects of shadow work: surface shadow work and deep shadow work. And here we're going to talk about shamanic shadow work. Good. So, Elena, you received your moonstone pendulum. Yeah, you're so welcome. So happy you received it. Elena is one of my apprentices, and she was one of the first 3 to join me in the last round of it. So she got a special present. It was actually one of the last ones that I had. Chantal, welcome. Beautiful to have you too. Okay, ladies, let's dive in. So what is the shadow? How is it created? The shadow is an unconscious aspect of yourself that the conscious part of you judges, fears, or rejects to the degree that you don't identify it as part of yourself. Right? So it's this nasty little hidden part of you that you'd like to think is actually not you. And it's also important to know that the shadow is not just one energy, it's actually many different energies. It's like a dark hole in your heart that you have forced some parts of yourself into that you dislike. So you have judged them to be bad and felt the necessity to hide them from yourself and from others. Now, why? Right? Why? So it's because you were taught that they were bad by your parents or by society at large. And that process already started in childhood, and it intensified as you were growing up. And we keep adding to our shadow. Unless obviously we do shadow work, then, then we dissolve our shadow slowly but surely. So, it's also, I notice, especially from my own childhood as well, that it's not just the parts that were judged as bad, but it's also, the parts that there was no room for, there wasn't any space for you to express that part of yourself, no attention for it, no praise for it, no tolerance for it. And so you stuffed that part away to deal with and express with later. For me, that was grief in my life, grief over my mother's death, which there was simply no room for it. I had to take care of my brothers, and that was it, right? So I didn't deal with it for a long time. And so you stuffed it away. We stuffed it away with that intention of dealing with it later when there was time and space. Somehow there never seemed to be. So at some point we concluded that this part of us wasn't important, or that it, had no right to be there, or that we had no right to feel this way, or that it wasn't even there. Right? And so it stayed stuffed away. So does this make sense so far? Any questions so far? Hi, Polly, welcome. My goodness, I forgot my tea in the kitchen. It's so cold, I made myself tea and I forgot about it. Well, never mind, I've got my blanket. So what's really important to know is that your shadow is not the same thing as your shadow behaviors. And it's those that make us so afraid to take a closer look at our shadow. Because shadow behavior is often violent and definitely erratic, it seems irrational, and it results, not from the presence of your shadow, but from the fact that you are not facing your shadow. So when you try to ignore your shadow, that's when you get triggered in challenging ways, so that you notice that there is this hidden part of you that wants to be looked at. And the problem is also that we mostly make the mistake that we think that the people around us are the problem, while really they are just a trigger. And that's why our shadow often haunts us for such a long time, throughout different relationships and circumstances, so that one day we realize that the only common denominator in all of these experiences is us. And then, if we are brave, we stop focusing so much on others, we stop pretending, we stop blaming, and we can start to look within. So the truth is that the shadow isn't something bad at all, right? It is part of you that needs your awareness and acceptance, so it can transform back into what it used to be before it got rejected, it stuffed away. So let's get clear on what that means with an example. Okay, so let's say you easily get triggered into being angry. Then anger is one aspect of your shadow. Especially if you really dislike yourself when you're angry, and you try not to be angry, right? But you still get triggered into it. And anger is a very common part of the shadow, since anger is not something very acceptable in our societies, right? So the thing is, what was that anger before it was anger? Let me know in the comments if you know the origin of anger. Because anger is not a primary emotion. It's a secondary emotion. It's what is created when we can't deal with a specific primary emotion. Christy is saying it all makes sense so far. Great, good. Hi Emma, great you're here as well. So the emotion that was there before the anger was sadness. The intense kind of sadness that we also call grief sometimes. When we can't process that, when it's too big, when we would fall into a hole that would swallow us if we did try to process it fully, that's when anger comes to our defense. It makes us strong for the moment. It's a survival mechanism. But at some point, when we have the strength and the presence we need, then we have to release that anger again and feel the sadness underneath. And if we don't, and especially if we judge that anger and feel like it doesn't even belong to us, that's when anger becomes part of our shadow, of the subconscious, the dormant, dark side of you that you have no control over and that can completely overwhelm you when it comes up. So who knows what I'm talking about here? I definitely know this part very well. Also, let me know what other emotions are typical shadow emotions. Emotions that we judge so that eventually they take on a life of its own, of their own. So let me know in the comments. Hi, Anneli. Great you're here as well. Hi, Jennifer. You felt that too, Emma, huh? Yeah. Yeah, so other typical emotions that we judge are fear, hatred, lust, jealousy, right? So these might have started as something really innocent, like a desire to express and act on our natural sexuality, which was repressed, for example, by a prude parent or by a dominating partner, or a dislike towards someone or something that we were pushed towards. That would we have been able to talk about that and respect it and act accordingly, it would have never turned into hatred, right? So these emotions become part of our shadow when we judge them, when we feel like we shouldn't feel like this. And hidden away, these emotions only intensify, and then they come up and trigger us into shadow behaviors, right? And these are so challenging to ourselves and others, obviously, right? But really, they are a gift, because when you get triggered into shadow behaviors like screaming or lying or whatnot, that is a gift because it makes you notice that something isn't right. Imagine if the shadow just lay dormant and it didn't act up. I mean, your life would stay very small, right? Very, very human. You would never expand into your divine self. Your shadow is trying to get you to confront your fears and anger and self-hate and self-judgment so that you can embrace yourself fully in your human dimension with all of your flaws, and that in turn opens up the portal to your divine self, right? It's like a tree. When it doesn't have strong roots, when it doesn't grow down deeply into the earth, first, it can't grow upwards into the sky. Pretty much the basis of shamanism as well. So how do we confront the shadow? We do it with shadow work. Wait, let me check your comments. So many of them coming in. Emma, you're saying, what about low mood when you're feeling lethargic? I wouldn't really say that's part of your shadow. Could be a side effect of something that's in your shadow. Could also just be an imbalance in your chakras. Yeah, exactly. If the shadow self didn't act up, we would be zombies. Exactly, Melissa. Okay, so shadow work, first of all, involves a shift in consciousness. You have to switch out of your everyday consciousness and expand your awareness to see your shadow clearly. And that is often very difficult to do alone, which is why it can be very helpful to get help when you deal with an aspect of your shadow. Now, those of you who have studied shamanic journeying with me or are currently studying shamanic journeying with me, like Anneli and Emma and Chantal, so you know very well how to create that shift in consciousness. Now, the next step then is to transform the relationship that you have towards your shadow. You need to develop compassion for this discarded aspect of yourself, compassion for yourself, and realize that you're always doing the best that you can. This is so important when you're in the midst of, self-hatred and self-judgment. How are you gonna work with yourself, right? So those are the first two steps, okay? So shifting consciousness and this self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-love. And then there's two types of shadow work. There's the surface and the deep work. And before you start either of those, you have to first become aware of the shadow aspect that you want to work with. Please don't try to work with your shadow as a whole. That's just gonna swallow you. So to start shadow work, the first step is to create awareness of the specific aspect of your shadow that you want to work with. Pick a part of your shadow that is coming up for you a lot in your life with medium intensity. Okay? The easiest way to do that is to notice your shadow behavior. Now, if your biggest problem right now is that you get yourself into those intense screaming fits that you direct at your partner, for some reason or another, then don't pick this as an aspect of your shadow to work with if you haven't done shadow work before, because it will be overwhelming. But definitely stay close to that aspect of your shadow, right? And start dealing with it in a less intense way. So let's say you have another problem, which is how much you dislike your neighbor for whatever reason, because you don't like how she cleans the hallway, for example. And that's why you give her the silent treatment when you'd really actually love to scream at her too. But here you can control yourself, right? So you see the screaming fits and the silent treatments. They're both shadow behaviors relating to the same part of your shadow, which is anger. So, working with your neighbor first is going to approach that part of your shadow in a much safer way than diving right into that part of your shadow where your partner is concerned. Now, it's important to know that your mind will not help you in dealing with your shadow. Our mind can't fully understand our shadow. Our shadow was started to be created years, maybe probably decades ago. Many people and situations played into it. It's just too complex. So don't try to think about everything that your neighbor has said or done, or everything that she didn't do over the years and how you reacted, okay? Don't go into the mind stuff. Don't go into the drama. Don't go into the blame, the justifications. Don't try mulling it over. You have to go deeper. So that's what we do with shadow work. We're going to first cover surface shadow work. Before I dive in, let me know if all of this makes sense so far, if you have questions so far. Very big in this circle for all those of you who are new, always ask questions. Hi Inga, so lovely to have you here. Inga lives in Findhorn, an eco-village in Scotland that I also used to live at with my son Lou. She's saying, so useful to hear this today. Anger is mine, and get fights with my partner makes me even angrier. Yeah, I feel you. I know this one really well. Polly says, good so far. Okay, good. So let's dive into surface shadow work. So this deals with the surface layer of the shadow, but it doesn't tackle the root. But this type of work is still really important. It's great if you're new to this kind of intense inner transformation, because shadow work isn't easy. So don't dive head first into deep shadow work if you were not used to looking at the most difficult things about yourself, okay? And it's also great to, as a start into deeper work, right? To approach your shadow first from the practical, emotional, relational levels before you dive deeper into the energetic reality of it, into the soul level cause, right? So this gives you a great first impression of what you're actually dealing with, how deep it goes, so that you know also how to go deeper later and what kind of support you're going to need to do that. So here's how you can go about surface shadow work. A really good way to go about it is emotional processing. Okay, there's lots of ways to do this. You can sit with it, right? Just taking some time to feel into this part of your shadow, feeling the feelings, really conjure up the situations. Don't go into your mind though. Just stay with your heart, stay with your feelings, breathe with it. And that's a really great way to receive insights and start the process. Crying. So often tears well up in us and we suppress them, right? But crying is such an important way of processing. The tears are really healing helpers. So just let them roll. And instead of saying something or doing something, to distract yourself from your tears, just go with it, cry, feel, breathe, and you'll feel relieved and closer to yourself. And afterwards, a clear way to deal further with your shadow might be apparent. Laughing can be just as healing, especially those crazy kinds of belly laughters, okay? So an easy entry gate to this way of processing is playing with children. And laughter can also quickly turn into tears. And when that happens, let it happen, relax into it. Don't excuse yourself, show yourself, give yourself space. And a big part of the problem with our shadow is that we're hiding part of who we are. So, let's show ourselves more, right? Especially our emotional selves. That's a really, really great starting point into shadow work. Screaming, stomping, hitting pillows when you're alone and not afraid of anybody witnessing you, that can also be a really great way to start shadow work. And a very effective way to do surface shadow work that often leads directly into deeper shadow work is doing what you are afraid of or embarrassed of that your shadow is connected to. Okay? Good. If there's any questions about emotional processing, let me know in the comments. And I'm diving into creative processing, which is another really good way to do surface shadow work. So here, choose however you like to express yourself creatively, right? It could be through painting, through drawing, songwriting. Your creativity is really a great path to start getting closer to your shadow. Just dedicate a creative session to your shadow, to getting closer to it. It's like a beautiful way of honoring it, making it visible, and often it's a really good way to reach into the subconscious. Another beautiful way to do surface shadow work is processing through movement, dancing it out, running, dedicating your asana practice to it, to honor your shadow, to express it. So find an exact intention for that. And you could also just use one asana to get in touch with your shadow and perform it daily for a while until you feel like you're really in touch with it and can go deeper. Now, stretching, especially deep stretches, are an excellent way to get in touch with your shadow. And a great asana for that is Paschimottanasana, where you sit on your mat and you stretch out both legs to the side and then you lean forwards until you really feel the stretch. Don't strain, but definitely feel the stretch. And then find a way to relax into that stretch by placing your hands or even your elbows onto the floor. You can also lean onto a cushion if that's easier, so that you can relax and really pay attention to your emotions, right? And feel into your heart space. And when you do this kind of forward-leaning stretch and then see what comes up. Just pay attention to your emotions and breathe into your emotions and breathe through them, and that you might be, moved into something else. You might start to laugh or cry. You might have a great idea of how to go deeper from there. So an important part of the shadow work is to, let things unfold, because your shadow is unpredictable, right? That's the whole point about it. It's about trusting yourself, trusting your shadow, trusting life, that this will unfold for you in the right direction, and just setting the intention of working with your shadow and choosing a way that seems right for you at the moment to start approaching this. Good. Before I dive into the fourth way that we can do surface shadow work, which is relational processing, let me just check your comments. Good. So far, so good. Makes sense to me. Makes sense. How do you write that asana? Paschimottanasana. I'm going to write it for you. Do you think Kundalini yoga is good for shadow work? I don't know. I mean, obviously, if this is what comes to you, it will be for a reason, Melissa. But the chakras, in working with the chakras, in my opinion, is not the best way to approach the shadow. Chakra work is all about finding balance with a specific energetic center in your body, in your energy field, and the shadow is somewhere else, right? The shadow is in your subconscious. So I would say it could be a sideways path into shadow work, but it's not a direct one, I would say. But I don't know enough about Kundalini yoga. I mean, I know what it's about. I've never really practiced it much though. So who knows, like whatever you feel you want to explore, do that, right? This is your shadow. This is your path. And what was I going to do now before I go on? Oh yeah, write Paschimottanasana into the comments for Emma. There you go. I'm really bad with the English names because the English names are so confusing with the asanas. But I think this one is called like, I have no idea, to be honest. Something weird like both legs stretch or something like that. Okay. Of course, I check the comments before moving on, Melissa. It's important to me that I'm here for you. That's what these sessions are for. Good. So let's go into relational processing. Your loved ones are your mirror, and a great way to do shadow work is watch for what inside of you gets triggered and then process it both alone by reflecting on it with a cool head and looking for the origin story in the past, and working with forgiving yourself and the old players and the current players, and also to process with the person who triggers you now, and if possible, even with the one from the original story, by talking about it in the I perspective, right, without the blame. And the best way to make that happen is by actually not just waiting for it to happen, but to actually schedule the talk, to set some rules. For example, we're going to talk in the I perspective, I feel, etc. And you could use like, you could use a mediator for it, right? You could have like, there's this old shamanic practice of a talking head, or whatever you want to call it. Like, for example, I could hold the stone, and when I have the stone, it's my time to talk. And then when you have the stone, it is your turn to talk. So a good way to, be civil about it, which is difficult, right, when it comes to our shadow. Now, Maren, I don't think Maren is live, but I'm sure she'll be on the replay. She's in Australia, so weird time zone difference. So she asked, how can we keep our vibration high when working with our shadow reflected in others? So this is spot on for what we just covered, the relational processing. So Maren, I recommend several things. I mean, obviously what I just said, right? It's actually make space to process together. And what's also really important is to talk about what is happening, right? Like when it is happening. I mean, when you're already doing the shadow work together, you're already into it, right? But before that process happens, you need to first voice that this is, that your shadow is triggered. So take a step away from the drama and talk about the fact that this is projection that's going on, and that you're just in this process to mirror each other and to help each other and to heal, and not because one of you is the problem. And once that has been clearly voiced, it's often easier to not go that deep into the drama once the triggering occurs again, because it probably will, right? Before you've done the deep kind of shadow work. And the second thing is to decide on a course of action on how to deal with the shadow, either alone or together, or, as I recommend in a relationship, both. So the most important thing here is to try to not have any expectations of your partner and focus more on yourself. I know it's difficult, but you can't ever change somebody else. You can only change yourself, right? So if you find your way back to yourself, taking full responsibility for your part in all of this, it makes it a lot more easier and a lot more empowering. And lastly, obviously, a really important point here is energetic hygiene, right? Clear your personal energetic space as often as you can. I teach my apprentices this as one of the first things, because it is so important that we don't let others get into our personal energetic space, not our lovers, not our children, because otherwise relating in a healthy, loving way becomes very difficult. And another way, I hope, Marin, this answers your question. And another way to go about relational processing, and I wanted to mention, is to talk about it with somebody who is not directly concerned by your shadow behavior, who you trust, like a good friend or a therapist or a healer, so you can talk with no filter. Speaking your raw truth can be so liberating. So what you do is you pick the kind of processing that is best suited to the part of your shadow that you're dealing with. So if we go back to the example of anger with your partner and your neighbor, then you could first process on your own with the help of emotional processing, creative processing, or processing through movement, or maybe all three or two of them. You could, for example, choose one for 3 days in a row, or you could go with all three in one day if you want a more intensive process, or you could just stick with one for a while, whatever serves you. And then after that, you might be ready for relational processing. Like saying something nice to your neighbor, just to see how that feels, to let go of that anger, even just for a moment, as a first tentative step. And then you can take it from there, letting yourself be guided by your intuition. And later on, once you feel like your neighbor, you don't want to gut her anymore, then, then you can tackle the anger with your partner, right? So let me know in the comments if this is helpful so far. Before we go on. By clearing your energetic space, do you mean smudging? No, I don't, Emma. It's good that you're asking. I don't mean your living space. I mean your own energy, like your own energetic space that is always around you, your own energy. So, Emma, you've been in the transformation, right? So when you go to the stone circle, when you go to your place of power, to the tree of life, and you imagine yourself in the middle of that as the tree of life, growing your roots down into the earth, expanding your branches up into the sky, and then feel into the stone circle. Is this just your energy that's filling it, or do you feel other people or issues or emotions there that aren't actually yours? Right? I mean, I very often see my partner and my child in there. And obviously I feel them in there, and I do this so much, so I already know, right? Whenever I get overwhelmed in family situations, I know, okay, my energetic space isn't clear. They're in it, but they have no right to be. This is not their space. But it's my responsibility to clear that space and not theirs, not to get in it, right? So this is about boundaries, and in love, that's the most important thing ever, right? Yeah, Tana, this is a specific topic. I can't teach this right now here. It would take too much time. But this is something that I do teach my transformation members, my apprentices. It's a process that often takes us a little bit of time to learn, because it's like a threefold process. We first have to learn to clear our minds, to silence our minds. We have to learn how to descend our energy into our heart so that we can actually perceive our energetic space correctly. And then we have to learn how the energetic clearing works. But it can be done, and it's a really, really useful process. So feel free to send me a PM if you want me to go deeper into that. Good. So this kind of surface shadow work is very effective. So absolutely do it, but don't expect it to be the end of the story. At some point you will have to go deeper, because your neighbor, your partner, they aren't the root cause of this aspect of your shadow. Your shadow was probably created long before you met them, and that's now in your life. Those are just the players, and this is just acting up so that you notice that problem, right? So you can do something about it. Okay, so how do we get to the root of it all? With deep shadow work. So this is great if you are already experienced with going deep within, with intense inner transformation. And it's also great as a second stage to go deeper with your shadow if you have worked with surface shadow work before. The difference to surface shadow work is that we go to the source of the problem, not just to the expression of it. So we will be directly confronted with the memories, the players of the past, and the full force of whatever hurt happened. and the full force of that emotion that we haven't wanted to feel. So to go this deep it's always good to have guidance, because you might be immersed really deep and lose your way without somebody at your side. And that's what I love about shamanic shadow work, that you don't do it alone, ever. So let's dive into that. Shamanic shadow work is the most powerful kind of shadow work, since you work with the deepest level of yourself. I mean, like other ways to deal with your shadow, deeper ways would be hypnosis, for example, but you don't go to the soul level with that. But with shamanic shadow work, you do. And there's another really important aspect here, which is spirit. In shamanism, we work directly with spirit, which is where your soul comes in contact with higher forces that can aid you with your shadow work. And what I meant with that you're never alone when you do shamanic shadow work is you ideally have a real life shaman at your side, but even if you don't, you always have your spirit guides. And that's what we're going to talk about more in a minute. So what does shamanic shadow work look like? For shamanic shadow work, we need shamanic journeying. And this is an age-old way of altering our state of consciousness by listening to the beat of the drum. And from that trance state, we can travel the energetic reality of ourselves and the whole universe. So on a shamanic journey, you can fully face your shadow because you can see it, you can feel it, you can let it express itself, let it be heard and seen, and do that for as long as it takes for your shadow to transform. So there are 4 aspects of shamanic shadow work that I want to point out here. Those are the ones that I personally work with. And those are working with your shadow animal, performing shadow integrations, shamanic inner child healing, and shamanic descents. So before I dive into it, let me check the comments. Melissa, serious problems with clearing your energetic space? Emma, you're saying you don't see anybody in your energetic space, just yourself. Maybe you avoid being in reality. I don't know, dear. Maybe you're not going deep enough into the trance state, and that's why. Emma, just come to the next transformation sharing session. We can talk more about this. Okay. Good. So many of you have heard about power animals, which are energies that can support you, that take the form of a specific animal and lend you a specific kind of power. And one type of power animal is called spirit animal, which represents your own energy in animal form and is your constant companion once you have been reunited with it, and it magnifies your personal power. Everybody has just one spirit animal, though we can have many power animals that can also change. And there is also a type of power animal that we call shadow animal, where the same rule applies as with the spirit animal. You only have one, and it represents your shadow. But this is often an animal that you are afraid of, or that you really hate, or that you find disgusting. So what animal comes to you as you say this? No, Magda, I don't have new hair, but I've just been to Italy and there was a lot of sunshine and being in the sea, so my hair is just a little bit lighter. I never color my hair, but it's a little bit lighter. And I went to my yoga class before the session, so I actually had a hairdryer there, which I don't have at home. That's what maybe what it is. Yeah, snake. Tana, Magda, you're saying snake. This is what very often comes up for people. It's very interesting. Spiders, that's Jessica. Yeah, so there you go. So you project your own feelings about yourself onto this animal. So working with your shadow animal by interacting with it on a shamanic journey is a super powerful way to do shadow work. once you have faced your shadow in the form of your shadow animal, then you can accept that this is a part of you, and then it will turn into a strength. There is no animal that doesn't have a specific power, and this will be yours once your shadow has dissolved. I mean, just think about spiders, right? They are just these beautiful beings who can just like create these awesome webs. It's like they're creating their completely own world, right? And every spider has a completely different kind of pattern in their nets. I mean, we can learn so much from that, right? About creating our own realities. Good, and there is an even more direct way of confronting your shadow in shamanism, and that is to do a shadow integration journey. And here you meet your shadow head on. You meet yourself as your shadow, and that can be really a hard thing to do, but it can be very healing. It can be a very fast, direct, powerful way to deal with your shadow if it's done correctly. So there are different starting points into the shamanic integration journey, difficult emotions, like we've already talked about, difficult memories, physical pains. And they can really help you to form an intention for the specific part of your shadow that you want to face. And that's what you enter the shamanic realm with. And from there, you let unfold what will. So for this kind of work, you really have to be an advanced practitioner, since you will otherwise not be able to completely let go into the process, which is why I guide my apprentices into this, as opposed to letting them do their own shadow integration journey at the start of their 8 months shamanic training. So this is the kind of thing that you learn with me in the apprenticeship. You learn how to do it for yourself, to heal yourself, and then you learn how to do it for others to help them heal. And the apprenticeship will open its doors again very soon, which is so exciting. And you're all invited to the pre-party, which many of you have come to the circle for, which is my free 5-day challenge for aspiring healers, which we will kick off on the 7th of October. It will be insane. I will give a crazy amount of value, so absolutely make it a priority to be there and live if you can, because the energy is going to be just like really beautiful, really uplifting everybody. Good. So the third type of deep shamanic shadow work is shamanic inner child healing. Our shadow has its origin in our childhood. So working with our inner child, the child aspect of ourselves that is still an active part of who we are today, that's, these child aspects, they often directly correspond to our shadow aspect. I have created a shamanic inner child healing series where we deal with the following shadow aspects: fear, anger, rejection, sadness, unworthiness, self-hatred, struggle, stress, and scarcity. This series is comprised out of 8 healing sessions, and the investment for it is 222 euros only. And you get it as a free gift if you join us for the next Shamanic Yoga online retreat within the next 48 hours. This is another reason for all those of you who are new why these Saturday sessions are so amazing, because I always make really cool deals for those of you who want to dive deeper into my work. It's always a good way to show up here live or watch the recording soon, because the deals are always timed. So the fourth way to do the deep shadow work, the shamanic shadow work, is a shamanic descent. And this online retreat that I'm going to hold is a shamanic descent. And that is an indirect way of dealing with our shadows, but it is very effective. So on a descent, we go downwards into our subconscious, step by step, to face who we are without our circumstances, without our loved ones, without our status. And, the shadow only exists while you are not willing to look at yourself fully, right? And when you're willing to meet yourself raw, naked, your innermost self on descent, then there is just no need for your shadow to exist anymore, and it can dissolve. So a descent, if properly done, can be absolutely life-changing in its power. And I'm leading you on exactly that kind of descent during a 15-day online retreat starting in February of next year, where we will start on the full moon, an excellent time to start shadow work. and shed everything that is just decorum, step by step. And then we meet with the dark goddess in the underworld to be initiated into the next highest version of ourselves. And we are reborn into the light as we ascend back upwards and celebrate together on the new moon. I so look forward to this. I held an online retreat last year as well, and it was just like insane. I would have wanted it to continue forever. It will be really, really transformational. I'm super excited about it. And the early bird price is still available right now. It's 999 euros, payable in 3 installments. And like I said before, if you sign up to it within the next 48 hours, then I will gift you the complete Inner Child Healing Series as a free bonus. And we'll give you access to that right now, so you can start your shadow work now before we go deeper together next year. I'm going to pop the link for you into the comments. I've also put it in the description. Here you go. So now you know how important shadow work is, right? And I hope that I'm making it easy for you to take the plunge, either by doing it yourself, starting this process with the surface shadow work, or diving deeper together with me. Because the thing is, your shadow is there, right? Whether you work with it or not. But life gets just that much more empowering when we have the courage and take the decision to meet things face on. Good. Any questions about shamanic shadow work or anything else that we covered in this session? I'm going to wait for your questions, and then I'm going to dive into one last thing, just the best moments to do shadow work, which I want to expand upon a little bit. Good. Any questions coming up for you, beauties? What about shadow aspects from previous lives? So what we're talking about here, like the shadow, this part of our subconscious, I don't think that we carry that over from our past lives, Annelie. That's not an experience that I would have made. What made you think that? We take, I mean, mostly what we do, right, is we connecting to our past lives is that we lose parts of ourselves in our past lives. So it's more about getting our power back with soul retrieval. It's not really that we take bad things into the next life. Good. So the best moment to do shadow work is either when you start your period. That's a really, really good way to start shadow work. Or on the full moon, right? Because the full moon, first of all, sheds light onto everything, right? There we can generate a lot of awareness on the full moon, and also after the full moon, for the 2 weeks after that, leading up to the new moon, the energy is waning, right? So we can use this pull away to dissolve the shadow. That's very powerful. Good. So if there's no more question, we're going to end this session. And please make sure to join me back here next Saturday at the same time, especially for all those of you who have joined me in this circle recently and who are here for the challenge, because next Saturday we're going to prepare ourselves for the challenge for aspiring healers by diving deeper into the calling of a shaman. Lots of love to all of you. I look forward to getting to know all of you better soon. And everybody on the replay, any questions that come up, please let me have them, and I'm going to follow up with you in the comments. Lots of love to all of you, and happy shadow work. Bye for now.